I'm a fitness instructor. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a managing director. I'm not a CEO. However, I've been kind of put in this position, or not. I've found myself in this position, I should say, where now I'm running companies and I've had to employ people and fire people and raise funding and do all kinds of stuff. And I wasn't really trained for that. I'm a coach. You know what I mean? I'm a fitness instructor. So I guess the biggest challenge was learning the business side of things and realizing that that's half of it. You know what I mean? I love coaching and I prefer coaching than the behind the scenes of running a business. But if I don't do that stuff, I'm not going to see the clients I want to work with or build the programs or do the things I want to do on that side of things. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, just developing the business acumen, I guess.
Welcome to Push to Be More with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Now, this is a show that talks about the stuff that makes life work. And to help us do just that, today I am chatting with Dan Roberts about where he has had to push through, what he does to recharge his batteries and to be, as well as what more looks like for Dan. The show notes and transcript from our conversation will be available on our website, pushtobemore.com. And whilst you're on our website, you can also sign up for our newsletter. And each week we will email you the links and the show notes from the show automatically. They get sent direct to your inbox, totally free. So do check that out. Now, this episode is brought to you by Orion Media, which helps entrepreneurs and business leaders set up and run their own successful podcast. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's a pretty insanely good marketing tool, not going to lie. I have found running my own podcast to be really rewarding. It opens doors to amazing people like nothing else I've seen. I've built networks, made friends, and had a platform to champion my customers, my team, and my suppliers. And so I think just about all of us should have a podcast for our marketing efforts simply because it's had such a big impact on my own business. And if that sounds intriguing and you kind of go, well, Matt, there's all kinds of problems with your theory, like I don't know the technology, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, that's fine. That's where Orion Media help you. You see, they take all of that off your plate. You just get to chat to amazing people. They take care of everything else. So if you're wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, do connect with them at orionmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. Now, that's our show sponsor. Let's meet today's guest, Dan Roberts, a high-energy personal trainer, movement coach, and the secret weapon behind those Hollywood blockbuster fight scenes. Oh, yes. Juggling roles as a strength conditioning maestro and a cherished mentor to fellow trainers, Dan also finds time, because, you know, he's not busy enough, to create revolutionary workout systems like Methodology X. He's the dynamic managing director of the Dan Roberts Group of companies. He's not just a London local, but apparently a bit of an international sensation, transforming fitness landscapes both online and across the globe. Dan, that's quite an intro, man. Welcome to the show. Great to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'd like to employ you as my PR manager immediately, please. You make me sound so wonderful, and I hope I wish I could.
Well, I wish I could take credit. That's the production team at Orion Media writing all this amazing stuff. I'm just like, I love it when they rewrite bios for clients, you know, and
I definitely didn't write that. Yeah, I love it though. Thank you.
It's great, isn't it? It's great. It's wonderful. Well, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited because before we hit the record button, we were just chatting away. I was a little bit late getting on the call because I got sucked into your website, the danrobertsgroup.com website. You just get drawn in. You just get sucked in. It's a very good website. So yeah, I mean, one of the things I discovered, and what my opening question on these podcasts is I call it the podcast question. If you had a podcast and you could interview anybody, past or present, had a profound influence on your life, who would that be? But it turns out you don't just have one, but two of your own podcasts. What's that all about?
Yeah, silliness, greediness, lockdown. You know what though? Like I'm sure you agree, it's an amazing marketing tool. Podcasting, you know, and also I'm always a fan of doing things which help my business, but also help me develop as well. And I found that podcasting has helped me be a bit more succinct, learn how to kind of be more interesting when I have a limited time. It's forced me to kind of improve, I guess, my communication skills. So that's half the reason why I set it up. And the other reason is I have different brands, different products, and I have podcasts attached to different things I want to promote. For example, I have one product which is like a workout mainly for fashion models. So I have a podcast which is kind of dedicated to that, and I interview fashion models and fashion industry people. Also, I mentor quite a lot. I mentor quite a lot of personal trainers and strength coaches. And I have another business as part of the group which educates and mentors coaches. So it made sense to set up a podcast linked to that.
Sure.
They're both quite small, to be honest. They're not like yours, but they're fun. And it's just, I'm sure you found it too. Like you discover how bad you are at things when you first start, and you have to like quickly improve. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that rapid improvement. I always found with podcasting, and with all the clients that we're involved with, it's the first 10 episodes. If you can get through the first 10 episodes, life is a lot more simple with podcasting. You start getting your groove a little bit. But it's getting through those first 10 episodes that people really struggle the most with, which I find quite. I don't know why there's a magic number of 10. But how long have you been doing your podcast? How long have they been going?
I set them up during lockdown, like everybody else, I think, and they just sort of carried on a little bit. I'm not massively consistent, like, once every few weeks I'll do an episode. Okay. It's not my main thing, but I love it. I really enjoy it, but I actually prefer being a guest more because I don't have to do anything. I just have to react. You are thinking of questions and thinking of is this recording? Shit, is it not recording? I don't have to worry about that. So I'm very relaxed right now, and I much prefer being a guest.
Much prefer being because they have to ask the questions. It's up to the host whether the show's interesting.
You have to think about the timing as well, because I know I don't quite know what you're going to ask me today, but I'm sure there's some sort of structure going on, and if we spend too long on one thing, then you have to bring it back, and you have to always kind of be engaged but also thinking about the other stuff. And I just have to listen to you and talk to you one-on-one. I don't have to worry about anything. So I've got the easy role today, so yeah. Okay.
Wow, thanks. I mean, no pressure on me then.
Be amazing. That's what I heard when I read your bio from my company. They said you were the best podcaster ever, so I was like, fine. So,
let's do it. I should get you guys to write my PR. So you've got these podcasts, right, which you started in lockdown. And so let me go back to our question. Maybe they've been a guest already, but I'm curious if you could have anyone as a guest on your show, past or present. The only caveat is they've had to have had a profound influence on your life. Who would be on your guest list?
It's a really good question. With my, I'll give you an example, because it's someone I really wanted to have on, and he was actually my last person I did have on, and I was really chuffed. On my business podcast, I interview or chat with trainers I admire over the years, and there was a trainer in LA called Gunnar Peterson, who was even nowadays, he's one of the top kind of A-list celebrity trainer. He used to train the LA Lakers for a while, Kim Kardashian, Dwayne Johnson, Sly Stallone's trainer for a while. He's trained a lot of people. And back when I first started coaching, when I first did my qualification, I had this many years ago, 25 years ago, I had this dream of flying to Hollywood and training Hollywood stars and all that kind of stuff, which was so unrealistic. But he was at the time the top trainer, and I was for the last for the last 10 years, I've always wanted to meet him and have a chat with him. And having the podcast gave me an excuse to actually reach out to him and have a chat with him and build a relationship and have a good conversation. And we're still kind of friends now. And it was really cool because the podcast gave me an excuse to reach out, because I didn't really need a reason to talk to him. But and when someone's on a podcast, you can ask them hey, what are your biggest challenges? How did you do this? How did you do that? And I can really interrogate them, where if I went for a beer with this guy, it'd be really weird if I asked him all those questions. So it was Gunnar Peterson, and I had him on, and it was brilliant. It was what I wanted it to be. So
fantastic.
That's my answer.
That's a great answer, because it's you picked up on a point there, which is really important, that actually when you're speaking to someone like we are now on a podcast, the conversation has to get to a very good place very quickly. And you can't do that over a beer or a coffee. You have to have several beers, I think, before you can get as deep into the conversation.
Yeah.
But whereas on the podcast, you everyone expects to get there quite quickly. It's the remarkable thing about doing the shows. And so the fact that you have done this with Gunnar Peterson, I think it must have felt really, really special.
Yeah, it was great. It was really cool. And I felt I didn't feel like in awe. It was just nice because I'm older now. I'm not this 23-year-old going, wow, that's amazing. I'm 46 and I've kind of hit my career goals. So I didn't. It was nice just to like listen to his story, and I could relate to some things as well, rather than just like being all deferential. I could actually understand his journey, and it was it was cool. It was just a nice conversation, and
Fantastic.
we now have a working relationship, which we didn't have before. You know,
that's the other thing, isn't it? It's I find that if I reach out to people, celebrities in your niche, as a want of a better expression, the higher ups in your niche, or the people that have just written a book, authors, those kind of people that you go, I just wish I could have a conversation with. This was such a great book. I would love to have a conversation with them. If you go, I host this podcast, you fancy coming on? They're like, sure, man, because they've got to promote the book. So it's a really interesting way of connecting with people. So out of that interview then with Gunnar, what were some of the things that stood out to you?
It kind of just reconfirmed what I kind of figured out already, that to kind of make it in my industry, you have to be patient. you have to be really patient, and you can't really ever stop. You know what I mean? Like the biggest, like in my kind of world of like sort of personal training, the hardest thing is actually to stay relevant as you get older. That's one of the biggest battles. With the rise of social media, everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame every so often, but to actually stay relevant for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's hard. And I've tried to do that. He's done that. Quite a few other people over the world have done that. And they never stop. You know, they're always quite humble in terms of they don't think they're the best. They're constantly doing courses. Like he did, I'm constantly doing new qualifications. And it was nice to hear that he also recently finished a qualification he did online, like another fitness one. And the guy coaches LA Lakers. He doesn't really need more qualifications, you know, but he's doing it just for his own personal development. And that was nice to hear. Yeah, it was nice that it wasn't just connections, you know. It was actually also hard work. Oh, and living in LA. You know?
Living in LA. I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of LA, but that's just me. It's one of those things where this staying relevant that you talk about, and also the humility, being humble. Those two things seem to go hand in hand, don't they? Because I feel like if you get to a place where if you feel like you've attained, like you don't need any more qualifications, like you don't need to go any further, that's probably the fastest way to become irrelevant, I would have thought.
I totally agree. And also it links in, I'm in a bit of a niche in my world. Like I'm a trainer, and my company looks after private clients. Nearly all of them are in the entertainment industry. So we're very much in that little weird, wanky little niche of celebrity training world. And there's a lot of what you see in this little small world of celebrity training is as soon as someone trains someone vaguely famous, they shout about it loads. And then that's kind of guarantees you know that their career isn't going to go up. You know, if you shout about training someone who was on Hollyoaks, you're not really going to get Brad Pitt calling you. You have to kind of be quiet about it and do your work. And then slowly over the years, if you're in that particular world, you build a reputation behind the scenes. You don't talk about it on Instagram. Actually, that ruins your career in that world if you sort of show off too much, because production companies don't like it, agencies don't like it. So you have to. That's really interesting. You have to actually be humble, not just because it's a nice way of being and the correct way of being morally as a human being, but also on a business point of view. It actually makes business sense to be humble, shut up, get the work done, build a reputation behind the scenes, and that's kind of what the top people in my little world, who've been around for a while, are all doing. Some of them might have presences, but they're doing a lot more amazing things behind the scenes. And the right people know what they're doing, not just the public at large, or not Sun Magazine or TikTok, you know?
Super powerful, isn't it? And I imagine actually if you're training a lot of celebrities, that keeping their confidence is probably one of the key things. Can they trust you that when they're in the gym and they do something, silly that you're not going to go and tell whoever. Do you know what I mean? That ability to trust you and keep quiet on Instagram, I can see why there's longevity associated with that.
Particularly in that crowd who are constantly, if you hang out with some A-lister, they are way more nervous than you or I about being exposed about something, because they're so used to people kind of like taking pictures or trying to find out their secrets. So sometimes there's a bit of time for them to warm up to you. And if you lose that confidence, not only will they not hire you, but they'll tell all their other friends and their agent and their production company, hey, no, he wasn't good, don't hire him. So you have this like trickle effect where it will kind of eventually it'll mess up. I think it'll mess up your career, if that's your career, to train these people. If you're doing it just to say you've trained someone famous, which a lot of people do, then they'll talk about it and then they're done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they'll use it to sell something else. I mean, a lot of people do that. They'll train someone famous, say, hey, I'm a celebrity trainer. But in fact, they don't train any celebrities. They're just doing online training, and they're trading off the fact they once trained Hugh Jackman once 7 years ago, for example.
Yeah, when you're stopped by in a hotel. Maybe you trained with him.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to like not get involved in that. If actually your real clients are in that world, you have to kind of remember that your job is to help them. And as a coach, it's quite easy to be humble, because I'm not supposed to be famous or well known. Like, I'm supposed to shine a light on my clients and help them succeed. If I get any kind of like fame or get written about, I guess that's nice, but it's not really, I'm not the star here. My client is the star. I'm the coach. So it's weird when coaches, I think, become bigger than their clients or try to become bigger. I find it very odd, because if I wanted to be a star, I'd be an athlete or something. I'm a coach. I'm part of the support crew.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I'm just, as you're talking, Dan, I'm kind of thinking to myself that I can see why you've had the longevity that you've had with that attitude. And actually just that, if I just think about business as a general rule, the ability to think about the client and put the client's needs ahead of your instant 15 minutes of fame on Instagram, or whatever the pressing thing is,
even maybe short-term profits as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, whatever the things are, and just to serve them for the long term seems to be a winning strategy. You're 47, I'm 50, been around a little while, seen a few things, and you kind of go, yeah, there are some things which do work in the long run, and actually that's one of the things that works in the long run. But I'm curious. I mean, I've read a little bit of your story, but so I'm trying to figure out a way to answer this question. But did you sort of wake up one day and go, I'm going to be a celebrity trainer, or was this just sort of something that you stumbled into?
A bit of both. I mean, I started coaching when I was 16. I was a sports coach the first 5 years of my career, various different sports. And after a few doing other random things, I started personal training, or strength and conditioning coaching technically, in my early 20s. And when I first started, I had an athletic background, and I wanted to train athletes. So my goal was to train athletes. And I put all my focus on that for a good sort of 10 years. That was my goal. Then, I kind of reached that goal. I was looking after a national sports team, a lot of like Olympic athletes, Commonwealth Games athletes. I kind of got to the top of the world of strength conditioning. And then I've lived in a lot of different countries, and I was living in Brazil, living in Rio de Janeiro, and totally by accident, ended up training quite a few Victoria's Secret models, who are quite a big deal. It's very random. But and that's when I started training the models, and I'd never really trained people to tone up before. But it was quite interesting, because when you train like famous models, you suddenly get invited to parties. And I didn't get invited to parties when I was training like rugby players and football players. And it was like, suddenly when I got back to London, suddenly like Vogue started writing about me. No magazine had ever written about me, even though I was training like, really good athletes, and really technical stuff. And I was really proud of my career at that point, but no one had heard of me. This was before social media as well. But as soon as I started training people in the public eye, suddenly I got more attention, and it opened a lot of doors to various things. And then when I realized that, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all the way. So I want to train like A-listers. So I did have, at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be strategic about it, which I kind of was, and I did it.
So you're kind of strategic about it, and is an interesting phrase. So You got invited out by Universal Pictures, I read in 2011, to work on a film. Was that
Yeah,
your first?
that was my
That
first
was,
film. Yeah,
yeah. How
yeah.
was that? I mean, go within what you can actually tell the story of, given what we talked about earlier. But I'm kind of curious.
Well, it was
This
so
young
long
lad from
ago, and I
England.
didn't sign an NDA for that one, so it's fine. It was for Snow White and the Huntsman. That was my
Okay.
first film, and I was training the lead cast. Um, what's interesting about that is like a lot of the times I think it's in all business, but particularly in the world of coaching, there's a lot of luck involved. Particularly the first time you train, like your very first client. Imagine you just become qualified as a personal trainer. Your very first client, you've got no expertise or no experience whatsoever. It's kind of lucky they believe in you, to be honest, because you've got nothing to back it up. The first time you train an athlete, and that's their job, and you're looking after their body, that's kind of lucky. First time you train someone on Hollyoaks or someone super famous, it's kind of lucky. So I got lucky to get that gig. I was recommended by a trainer in LA who basically told Kristen Stewart, you have to see Dan. Now, that made it a lot easier because I had like the direct referral. And that was lucky because that trainer in LA knew me, and I had looked after a few of his clients in the previous 2 years. Not famous ones, but I'd looked after some of his clients before when they were in London.
Yeah.
And I did a good job. And then when he's involved in a lot of films, it's not Gunnar, it's another trainer. He recommended me to Kristen Stewart, who was the lead cast. So then she went to the production company and said, I want Dan Roberts. And then they're like, fine. And then they put me on. So that was lucky, because it's just because I knew that guy's called Jason, who kind of recommended me to Kristen. That's luck. That's luck,
Well,
then my job is to kind of not mess up, do a good job. You need to do a good job, and then basically, which means get the results which is needed, whatever they are specifically, in the time frame, and do it in a way which is enjoyable for the talent, and also you communicate well with the stunt team, the producers and the director, so it kind of flows. And then, funny enough, 2 years later, you get another call from Universal, say, oh, hey, we like you, we'll do it again. And it rolls like that. But the very first time was lucky. It's not like I went out to LA knocking on doors. I got a phone call saying, hey, do you mind training Kristen and Charlize for this film? All right. So that was lucky.
Yeah, I think of worse things to have to do. I mean, you say it is luck, and I do get that, because some of the stories that I have from my own business, you go, well, I was in the right place at the right time. But I'm also aware, I can't remember who was it that said it. No, was it Michael Jordan? He said, was it him that said, the more I practice, the luckier I seem to get? Yeah. And I think there's an element of, in your story, you get the call from Universal because you treated the client of another trainer really well. You did a good job. And actually there's a case of proving your craft and your worth in things that maybe aren't as shiny, for want of a better expression. And actually by doing that, you start to create these opportunities for luck to get involved, right?
You're exactly right, Matt, but that's why you have to be patient, because these connections take time. You get good at something and you prove your worth behind the scenes as well, and then suddenly something happens. Look at an actor, if some actor gets like a role out of nowhere, like Austin Butler for Elvis, like not that famous, but it's not like he was like a bad actor. He must have been an incredible actor to audition for that Elvis film. You know what I mean? It wasn't, he just like did it on the spot, and not many people knew he was an amazing actor, but in Hollywood, the right people knew he was amazing. That's why he was one of the guys who auditioned. So you do stuff behind the scenes, and you do your job well, and then you have to, I think, you can maybe improve your luck slightly by having good connections, but you can't completely control what kind of contract is going to come into your business. What you can control is what you do when you get that work. When you get a big new client, you can control how much attention you put on it, how good a job you do, the results you get. That's what you can do. But you can't always control that initial work. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do, totally. And I think you're totally right. And I think again, just looking back over life, it's like, if I work on me, like you're constantly getting more qualifications, going up was constantly getting more qualification. You work self-improvement, trying to make myself better. And the clients that I have in front of me, I'm going to serve them, even if they're not an A-lister celebrity, I will serve them as if they are. The more I do that, the more connections I make, the luckier I seem to get in a lot of ways, right? And I think it's probably a fair reflection, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very lucky now because I've got 30 years or so behind me of trying to do the right thing behind the scenes, not screwing anyone over, just being kind, helping people, and all that is kind of goodwill, which builds up behind the scenes. So now life is like running a business is a piece of cake now because of all the work I've done in the past and the goodwill I've sort of built up, hopefully.
Yeah. So what have been some of the challenges, Dan, that you've faced along the way?
Well, I think anyone who runs a business, there are some. I mean, I'm a fitness instructor. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a managing director. I'm not CEO. However, I've been kind of put in this position, or not. I've found myself in this position, I should say, where now I'm running companies, and I've had to employ people and fire people and raise funding and do all kinds of stuff. And I wasn't really trained for that. I'm a coach. You know what I mean? I'm a fitness instructor. So I guess the biggest challenge was learning the business side of things and realizing that that's half of it. You know what I mean? I love coaching, and I prefer coaching than the behind the scenes of running a business. But if I don't do that stuff, I'm not going to see the clients I want to work with or build the programs or do the things I want to do on that side of things. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, just developing the business acumen, I guess. So it's a bit of a woolly answer. It's not like I've had this major tragic event, but it's just been gradually kind of just learning how to run a business, multiple businesses. And it's, I don't know, how about you?
That.
What was yours?
I totally agree with you. I'd agree with you in a lot of ways that actually when you go to school, they don't teach you how to run a business. You can go and get an MBA. I don't have one. Do you know what I mean? I suppose there's a qualification I could go and get. But
I mean, I've actually got a business degree. My first degree was in business. I didn't learn anything relevant to running a business. At all. Nothing.
Wow. I'm not quite sure what that says, really. It's an interesting one. I mean, I did an accounting degree, which I came out of my degree. I did accounting and law and thought, I never want to be an accountant. I never want to be a lawyer. That was what I learned on my degree. And I suppose I learned how to interpret figures and how to read a balance sheet, which has proven to be very helpful, actually, in running your business and getting an intuition for figures. But the ability to deal, for me, running a business is a lot of it comes down to how well you deal with people. And actually, you will have learnt this in spades in coaching. Do you know what I mean? In terms of trying to get the best out of people. As you build a team, it's the same thing. I'm trying to get the best. I'm not the chief financial officer for our business. Michelle, she runs all of that. My job is not to do her job. My job is just to get the best out of her that I can. And I'm guessing actually that what you learn in coaching has probably proven to be quite helpful, I would have thought.
I think so. I mean, it's hard to tell because I've only got the experience. I've only got the knowledge I've already got. You know what I mean? I can't go back in time and not know how to coach people. And it's so ingrained because it's all I can do, really. I can't help but sort of when I like people, which helps. You know what I mean? And it's like I can't help but try and motivate them because my job is usually, I'm quite a positive person, and I can't help sort of naturally be to be a coach in all my relationships. I have to kind of sort of dial it down a little bit when I'm talking to people. I realize not everyone wants me to give them advice, because when people hire me, it's like they want my advice, but in normal life, they don't. And I have to kind of watch that a little bit. But I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. And you learn about anything which helps you learn about the human condition, I think, makes you a better manager. But it's not like you don't mess up. I mean, like in terms of employing people, that's a tricky one, to get right. I don't know anyone who's like, I knew exactly what to do and it was perfect. I talk to people like, I did this mistake, I'm not doing that again, did that mistake, never do that again. And that's usually how we learn, by making, it's so cliched, but we make mistakes. And then you try to repeat them. And I know with me, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've never, loads of mistakes, but it's never really worried me that much. Like, because it's like, okay, I'll learn from that. And I knew it was like part of my kind of story, as it were. And it's the best way of learning. Yeah. I don't really know what I'm answering there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really intrigued listening to you talk. Does that mean for you, do you deal maybe with regrets differently as a result of that type of thinking?
Do I deal with regrets differently? yeah, I mean, in terms of, I can't really think what regrets I have in terms of my life so far. So I guess I do, because I'm sure if someone else looked at me, it's like, my God, you don't regret this and this and this. But in my head, I don't really have any regrets, because it's all part of it. I mean, I think it comes down to how you see running a business and your career. I mean, if you see it as one big battle, or if you see it as like a thing to achieve, like you're only successful if you hit X amount of money, then I might have regrets. But I see it as an adventure. Like, I see life as an adventure. I see running a business as the perfect adventure, where you have an adventure, in essence, has to have ups and downs, has to have things you're not sure about. Like, if I knew exactly how my business would, like what it would be in 2 years' time, it would be just as depressing if I knew exactly how my life would be running in 2 years' time. I mean, if you imagine your life ahead now, if you knew exactly every day what was going to happen until the day you died, it would be so philosophically depressing, you'd probably want to end it. If you knew exactly, we need mystery, right? So it's quite, if you see running a business as an adventure, then when things happen like pandemics, you're like, oh, it's exciting. How shall I pivot from having a gym to suddenly being online, which I had to do, you know? And I was like, it's quite interesting. It's quite exciting, because I've been in a lot worse situations. So it's like, you sort of take things on the chin and you think, okay, this is a nice test. How can I test my stoicism and test my creativity? So I've had, like, when you asked at the beginning of the show, like what challenges, I've had various kind of challenges, but they haven't really felt that hard, because I've been quite confident that I can get myself out of it. And that's come from a few. The confidence is really important, I think, running a business. And for me, I know specifically where it came from. Like, I've started from scratch quite a few times. Like, I moved to where did I start off? I started from Australia, working as a trainer. Didn't know anyone there, did a qualification, did well. Then I moved back to London. And this is before social media, so you don't have any reputation. Built a business there. Moved to New York. I've moved to New Zealand. I've moved to, where else did I move to? Brazil as well. I've lived in quite a few places where I've started from scratch, had no contacts, and just rocked up with, not a massive amount of money, but a little CV, and gone, okay, I've got to find a place to live. I've got to find work, and I've got to do this by myself. No contact, no money. And I've done that quite a few times, like started from scratch. And because I've done that, I don't really, like, if I was to go bust now, it wouldn't really worry me that much, because I know I can build a business from scratch, because I've done it in various countries. And that confidence means you can deal with pandemics, or with employees leaving, or whatever, whatever it may be.
Yeah, super powerful, man. Super powerful. So this sort of confidence then, because you started up, is that something you've always had, like as a kid growing up? Is that something that came from the family? Or is that something that just you were literally thrown in the deep end when you moved to Australia and had to figure it out?
It came from my silly brain. I get bored really easily, and when I was I also get really inspired really easily as well. Like, even now, like a kid, when I was 17, I got really into reading Beat Generation books. These are writers in the 50s. Jack Kerouac's probably the most famous. Neil Cassidy, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg, and there was these bunch of writers in the 50s, actually 40s and 50s in America, who kind of lived life and they wrote about it, a bit like Hemingway. And it was like a little scene where they kind of, and they wanted to really discover the truth in life. So they experimented with drugs and sex and religion and traveling. And it was all very exciting when you read this stuff when you're like 17, And I remember I was sort of saving up money to go. My first trip I went by myself was a trip around America when I was 18, and I got a job. I used to be a tennis coach. I got a job teaching tennis in New York, and I saved a bit of money, and I did like Greyhounds, like all the way across America. And that gave me the confidence to then sort of really get into traveling when I was like a late teenager. Then when I was 19, I went to South America by myself, got a one-way ticket to Peru, and just spent 6 months traveling around. And that was cool. Then I went to India by myself, and I did all these like travels by myself with literally no budget, and just having to kind of like feel my way around. And that gave me a lot of confidence. So by the time I was like 23 or so, when I started my business, it felt like, oh, it's another adventure to being self-employed. It wasn't that nerve-wracking, because I figured I'd managed to handle like a civil war in Bolivia, or people banging on my door in Senegal trying to beat me up, and all random experiences, or drug dealers in Indonesia, various things you get involved with. Things happen when you're sort of traveling around by yourself when you're young. And if you can handle all of that, then setting up a little business, how hard can that be? So that's kind of like the mindset. And then, like I said, I see running a business as like an adventure. When I was in my 20s, I saw it as like, trekking the Himalayas and stuff. Now I get much more of my kicks from creating programs, building qualifications, running my business. That I find more fun than solo trekking somewhere,
Yeah.
Because I'm not 21 anymore.
Well, you say this is a different phase of life, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, getting married, when you get older, getting married is a bit of an adventure. But if you're 18, getting married is the worst thing in the world. But when you're in your 30s, amazing. So things change as we hopefully we evolve and as we grow through life. Again, I can't remember what you asked, but I'm just talking.
No, it's all good.
I'll be quiet.
It's all good. So you've got this business then, which obviously you pivoted during the pandemic. You said you had a gym and then you went online.
Completely online, yeah.
So you're now complete. So all your programming is now done online. Are you still flying out to Hollywood on occasions?
No, that's starting back probably like September, October. But no, for the last couple of years, once I realized I had to be online for a while, I decided to go all in, because I'm kind of, if you're going to do it properly. And we already were online beforehand, which again was lucky. Like you've mentioned, like there's some programs I've written in the introduction. I'd written a couple of programs which were like online programs, which are like subscription models, which people pay every month. Luckily, they were set up and filmed and all done and dusted like about a year to 2 years before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, luckily the sales for those,
you were just in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
So lucky.
Yeah.
If the pandemic hit 10 years earlier in terms of my career, I'd have been financially screwed. But just because I was older and had these things, I was lucky.
Yeah.
But I decided I was going to kind of use this opportunity to make sure my business is completely future-proof and completely bulletproof in terms of when there's another pandemic or something else happens. Because I never really thought about what happens if there's a pandemic until it happened, like a lot of people. So I don't want to imagine if it happens again in 5 years. I don't be like, oh god, I should have prepared for it. There's no excuse. So I want to make sure now my business is completely set, and it's nearly there now, where we don't need to do anything like face to face. Well, we don't now. We don't need to do anything face to face. We can run quite well online. Well, not the retreat business. The retreat business I had tanked, but that'll go fine, I think, in 6 months' time. But the other businesses I run, fine. So I'll be once I have a bit more time on my hands, end of the year, I'll be doing more trips.
Okay. So what does the future look like? What's growth look like for you and Dan Roberts Group? Where's it all going?
It's a really good question. It's something I've had to kind of reevaluated this when I was during the pandemic, because my business was going in a certain way. Like just before the pandemic, we had established partnerships with a few high-end hotels, with like Four Seasons and Shangri-La and a couple of others in London. And we were kind of, the plan at the time was to expand into hotels like around the world, like to have my programs in there and to train up the staff. And since the pandemic happened, I don't want to do that anymore because it just seems too much hard work. Sounds really bad, but I don't really want to do it anymore. So now I'm focusing on another part of my business, which is the developing trainers, but making sure that it's all automated. Like I've got courses and qualifications coming out, and I quite like helping coaches and helping trainers out, but I want to have programs they can buy and things they can buy where it's all done automatically, as it were. Because I quite like not killing myself working. I used to work like 6 a.m. Like I'd cycle. I live outside of London. I live in Surrey. I used to cycle to London, which was like an hour cycle ride. Get there for like 6:30, 7, work all day, come back like at 10:30 at night, and I do that 6 days a week for about 7-8 years. And it's like I've put my hours in, and I was like, I've done way over 30,000 hours of one-to-one training. It's a lot, and I kind of want to just spend a bit more time with my wife and a bit more time at home. So I'm trying to like slow down. I'm not trying to retire or anything with that, but I'm trying to have a little bit more of a balance, because I haven't really had balance in my life before. So really ambition's been, so I'm kind of like not as ambitious as I used to be, I guess, but I'm happy.
Well, it's a different kind of ambition now, isn't it? It's a different type of desire.
Well, I've hit my main goals. Like when I was a trainer, I had very clear goals about the kind of people I wanted to work with and the money I wanted to earn. And I hit those goals about 8-9 years ago. So everything else to me is like kind of a bonus, and it's been nice to kind of like feel like kind of like proud, I guess, or kind of feel happy when I look back at my career, like, yeah, I've set out to do something and I did what I wanted to do and I'm enjoying it. And there's a process of actually enjoying your work as well. I think there's a danger. I work with a lot of very high achieving people, and there's a danger of when you're so goal led is you never enjoy the moment. You're always thinking about the next thing. And I don't really want to be like that. And I've met some incredibly successful people who aren't massively happy because they're always striving for the next, I trained a guy 6 months ago who was worth 100 million, he was worth 90 million, and he was pissed off because he wasn't worth 100. Right. And that's the mentality you need to have to make 100 million, right? Yeah. That is a mentality. But it's not the mentality you need to have a balanced, happy life.
No. And actually that's going to drive, we could talk about the philosophical views on that point. But one of the things I am curious about, Dan, before we wrap up, you've put in 30,000 hours training people. So you will have learned one or two things about what motivates people during that time. So give us a little bit of insight into that. What have you discovered is some of the key motivators for people?
Well, I think we have to remember that motivation is largely bullshit, because the most successful people out there,
I love that.
They create routines. You know what I mean? Like I don't think people who like CEOs of big companies, they don't need to log on to Pinterest in the morning and get some motivational quotes to get them going. Quite often have things going on in their life, relationships or family stuff, which is hard. They still go to work no matter what. The athletes who are, top athletes who are training like 5, 6, 7 hours a day, they have times when they have breakups, they have times when they're sad, times where money's tight, times where mental health is tough. Like everyone, they all go through ups and downs, but they still turn up to training. They still do it because it's in their routine. So I think creating routines is far more powerful than kind of waiting for motivation. Sometimes people feel like sometimes I'm very motivated, sometimes I'm not very motivated, but I still get my work done no matter what. So I think waiting for motivation or trying to be more motivated is too emotionally exhausting. I think it's much better to create good habits, and then you don't have to think about it. Like brushing your teeth. Most of us brush our teeth every morning because it's a bit rank not to, and we do it and we don't think about it. Imagine doing a 3K run every morning. If you're not a runner, that's horrendous. But if you get into it after like a year of doing that, that's your routine. And you find a way of doing it. And if you talk to really fit people, look, even Obama did an hour of exercise every day while he was in office. He managed to find time. If it's important to you, you find the time. So if you know yourself, and that's the key thing, knowing yourself. If you know yourself, then you can kind of figure out ways to kind of incorporate things which you know are good for you. Be it reading more books, be it pushing yourself more, being it getting out of the house more, whatever it may be. So you know yourself, then you build a routine of doing that. And then it's like this constant never-ending, like this Tony Robbins constant never-ending improvement kind of thing. It becomes so automatic, you don't have to think about it. So I think that's the key to motivation, is building a routine. There's an old saying, you should form, what was it? There's an old saying, I can't remember. I'm going to remember it. Nice dead air. Okay, I'm going to remember it. Form good habits and make them your masters. That's it.
Form good habits and make them your masters, and that's
then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about it. Like I exercise every day, not because I want to, because it's just part of who I am. It's part of what I do. I always sort of manage to fit in some press ups or some squats or a little run or something. And it's not even like I don't really have any fitness goals anymore. It's just so part of my routine, and that keeps me healthy. Same as having breakfast, same as taking a vitamin pill, whatever.
Yeah. No, it's powerful. That's powerful. So actually part of your job then as a trainer is all about helping people build the right routine. Yeah.
Actually building the routine and actually holding them accountable. Well, there's a third thing. Setting high standards for them, which is really important. Most people aren't ambitious when it comes to their goals. That's true in business as well as their body. Set them to high, have high standards for them, help them set really high goals and hold them to these high standards by keeping them accountable, and then create a journey for them to make it easy. And that's it. And that's why, like with coaching, to be honest, like 90% is generic life coaching, facilitation work. 10% is the technical skill. Like some of the best coaches out there don't have all the technical knowledge, but because they hold their clients accountable, because they ask the right questions, it's amazing what they can achieve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how life coaching works. Like, hey, what are your goals? I want to do this. What's stopping you reaching those goals? Oh, this. What do you think you can do differently to help you reach those? Oh, I can do this. Okay. So if I hold you accountable every 2 weeks, what would you do? Oh, I'll do this. Okay, get on it. Like, I don't know anything about their business, but I can actually ask the right open-ended questions to facilitate growth. And that's what a lot of time executive coaches and life coaches do. And really good ones don't need to have any kind of technical expertise. They just need to know about psychology and questioning. So I think a lot of coaching is actually that, to be honest. And less of it is actually the actual mechanics of how to teach a deadlift. I mean, that's important, but I think when you're charging more money, anyone can kind of teach a bicep curl, to be honest. Like the difference between like a trainer who charges £10 an hour to someone who charges £200 an hour isn't really how they teach the bicep curl. It's more it's more about how they make the client feel and how they make sure it's accountable and part of the program. It's the other things on the outside of it.
Yeah. So what would your someone who's listening to the podcast, who's a personal trainer, they're in a gym, they're getting up at 6, they're working until 10 o'clock that night, they're putting their time in, right? But all they can see at the moment is just the grind of personal training in that gym. That's sort of become their life. Yeah. And they're listening to your story going, man, there's all kinds of possibilities. What would your advice be to them to sort of help them transition from where they are to maybe thinking outside of the gym? Is it just basically everything that you've just said, but repackaged towards being a personal trainer, or is there something else to it?
Well, I think the first thing is, it's like, you have to put your hours in first. If you want to, like, we talked about how there was luck. We talked about how I had luck in my career. And as you kind of rightly said, yeah, it was lucky, but you also had, like, you still knew what you're doing. Like, it was lucky to train so-and-so film star, but I still knew what I was doing, so I didn't mess up. So if someone's been training for, like, let's say 2 years and they're Virgin Active and they're training, they're coaching clients every day, and suddenly, like, they get a goal from Brad Pitt and Brad Pitt wants to fly you out and teach him, like, fight choreography. If you don't know, like, how to do fight choreography, and if you haven't got much experience, you've only done 2 years experience, he's not gonna immediately gel with you and, like, fly around the world with him. It's going to be like, oh, that was a mistake. You might maybe have an hour session and you'll never see him again. So there's no point getting to that level unless you're ready for it. So what you do is you build up your skills. So then when you're ready to go to the next step, you can actually you can do it with ease and it's not stress. So I think if you're in that situation in a gym, make sure that you actually are challenging yourself to be a better coach. For example, what I used to do is after every client, I used to write down notes afterwards about what I did well and what I did badly. And I was really strict with myself. And I really challenged myself to be better for that client the next session. I was like, okay, so what does that client want? How could I have been better? What should I do differently this time? And I made that into a habit of constantly reevaluating, or evaluating how I was in that session. And then I'd constantly do courses, think, how can I incorporate what I've read or what I've read online or that course I've done? How can I adapt that to help this client now? And I was really strict with myself about kind of forcing myself to be a better coach every week. I wanted to be a better coach this week than I was last week. And I did that again and again and again. And then, I worked in LA Fitness for a while. And then, I felt very much like I was ready to move on because I knew better, more than everyone else. And I was the busiest trainer. So it wasn't like I was just bored. It was like I was better than everyone else there. So it was ready for me to then go freelance and work in parks. I did. But if I did it just because I was bored and I just wanted to make more money, I wouldn't have made it. It's because I felt like I deserved it. And maybe it's like arrogance, but I felt like every kind of level, I felt like I deserved to go to the next level because I did the studying. And you have to put the hours in to feel like you deserve it. I don't ever want to have like imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? I want to feel like if someone calls me and want to work with me, there's a humility, there's always like a humility of like, oh, it's nice they've called me. But also on the flip side, there has to be a self-confidence like, yeah, of course they want to work with me. And that's important particularly when you're meeting, like working with very famous people, very like top athletes or top Hollywood actors. When you meet them, you can't be like, oh my God, I'm such a fan. That's not the way forward. It needs to be like, all right, you're good at what you do. I'm great at what I do. Let's partner up and let's get this done. That's what they want. They don't want someone going, oh my God, you're such a great actor. That's not the way forward.
That's
And you can't have that confidence unless you know your shit, unless you put the hours in, and then when whoever rocks up to you and want to work with them, you don't feel nervous. You get flown out to train, whatever. You feel, oh, it's nice. You're humble and you appreciate it. But when it actually gets to work, you're like, well, of course they want to work with me because I can help them this way, and this way, and I put the hours in. So going back to your question, the guy or girl in the gym, they need to get good enough that they kind of can get to the next level. So they need to push themselves, do more courses, try and be better every week. And then that's when they can start being more ambitious in terms of taking some risks. Setting up freelance.
Yeah, super powerful. As you're talking, I'm remembering. I'm trying desperately to think of the author, but I can't remember his name. But I remember reading the book "Become So Good That They Can't Ignore You." The name will come back to me. And as you're talking, I'm thinking that's exactly what that.
It's also linked to be so well known you don't have to introduce yourself as well. It's the same thing.
It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Listen, Dan, super powerful, man, and really, really. I feel like I've got so many more questions, but alas, time is upon us, and so. I'm grateful for the time you've given us already. If people want to reach out with you, if they want to reach out, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I guess going to my website will be quite a modern way of doing it, I suppose. Send a fax, I suppose. Send a fax.
Send a fax.
Send a fax. Send a carrier pigeon. I hope. Just shout my name really. You know what? Shout my name really loudly.
Really loudly.
See if I
see what happens.
See what happens. That's what they should do. I could give you my website, but you know what? It's so cliched, isn't it? And once one gets older, you don't really want to be cliched. So I'm not going to give you my website. They can Google. They can find me. If they really want to find me, I guess they can Google me.
If they really want to find you, they will do.
Or just shout my name really loudly and see what happens.
Yeah. Especially from, somewhere like in Edinburgh. Do it in Edinburgh and see what happens.
Brilliant. Never know. But patience is a virtue. Be patient. Be patient.
He'll be there at some point and we'll answer this, no doubt. That's really good. Dan, listen, man, thanks for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast. And
cheers, mate.
I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. It's been brilliant.
I do. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man. Well, what a great conversation that was. Huge thanks again for Dan joining me today. And also a big shout out to today's show sponsor, Orient Media. If you're wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, do connect with them at orientmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. We will, of course, link to them on the website pushtobemore.com, where you can also sign up for the newsletter and maybe short circuit the Googling Dan, because probably all the links will be on the website as well. Now, be sure to follow the Push to Be More podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, because we have got yet more great conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Dan has to bear it. I have to bear it. And you've got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More is produced by Orient Media. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The team that makes this show possible is Sadaf Bainon, Estella Robin, and Tanya Hutzalak. Our theme music was written by Josh Edmondson. And as I mentioned, if you would like to read the transcript or show notes, head over to the website pushtobemore.com. Now, that's it from me. That's it from Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I will see you next time. Bye for now.